Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar on mental health considerations for returning to campus and strategies for supporting students with an intellectual disability and autism. We are delighted that Larry Schallert agreed to present today. Before I officially introduce our presenter, please allow me to address a few logistical items. I'm Will Francis, Project Director for Post-Secondary Education at the UCLA Tarjan Center. The Tarjan Center at UCLA is a federally designated Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, the organizer and your host for today's webinar. Support for today's webinar comes from the California Community College's Chancellor's Office through a contract that enables us to provide technical assistance and training to California Community College's disabled students programs and services professionals who are working to provide equitable supports, services, and opportunities for students with disabilities, including intellectual disability and autism. Today's webinar is designed to respond to emerging needs to support students' mental health and well-being in the aftermath and ongoing experiences related to the coronavirus. At this point, I would like to thank all of you who are attending this webinar and have attended others that we have provided. Today will be my last day working at the UCLA Tarjan Center and hosting these webinars. My supervisor, former director of the Tarjan Center and now faculty of the center, Dr. Olivia Rayner, will take over this role in the future. I will place Dr. Rayner's email address in the chat in a few minutes. Again, to everyone, thank you, thank you, thank you. Now back to the webinar. For today's webinar, some of our colleagues are unable to participate and have requested a recording of the proceedings. To facilitate access to a clean recording of the webinar, we have muted all calls. As we proceed through the presentation, our presenters would love to respond to questions that arise from and that are related to the content of the presentation. Please look at the bottom of the Zoom program display where you will find a chat or text box. I'm asking at this time for you to enter your questions into that chat feature throughout the duration of the webinar. We will address your questions and welcome you to submit as many questions as naturally arise. You may ask questions throughout the webinar at any time. After the presentation, if time allows, we will address additional questions. This may be a good time to test the chat feature. Please take this opportunity to enter a greeting into the chat. I see that's happening. Thank you. Many of our institutions are having conversations and initiating practices designed to improve outcomes that are focused on increasing the number of students who earn a degree, credential, certificate, or transfer to four-year institutions and/or to attain employment in high-demand jobs, consistent with the Vision for Success, Guided Pathways, and AB 705. In addition, COVID-19 left many of us with lower student enrollment, among other challenges. In the wake and ongoing saga of the COVID-19 crisis, it may be important for the colleges to be aware of and to have some strategies for addressing the mental health needs of students with autism and intellectual disability. In today's presentation, our presenter will share information and strategies that may be helpful as we transition to whatever is emerging at your institution of higher education and as we plan for the future. Again, to all of our webinar participants, thank you for joining us today. And now I will provide some information about our presenter. Larry Schallert is the Assistant Director of Student Health and Wellness, as well as Mental Health Programs at College of the Canyons. He directs the college's personal counseling and wellness outreach programs and is a member of the Behavioral Intervention and Sexual Assault Response teams. He graduated from the University of Southern California, is a licensed clinical social worker, holds a pupil personnel services credential, is a diplomat in clinical social work, has private practice consulting and serving youth, families, and adults, and he has been an adjunct professor teaching master's level psychopathology and assessment courses. He has over 35 years of leadership experience working in community mental health, public schools, and education. He has received local, state, and national recognition for his leadership in developing school-based mental health programming, and several of his programs have been used as models for the Los Angeles County. Most recently, he has been honored by the NASW's 2019 California Social Worker of the Year, and his program received congressional recognition for leadership in the area of addressing mental health on campus and in the community. Larry's on the Los Angeles County Mental Health Commission and chairs the Santa Clarita Valley Suicide Prevention, Postvention, and Wellness Committee. It's an honor having you, Larry. Welcome back, and thank you for your willingness to share from the wealth of your knowledge with the California community colleges. And now, without further ado, here is Larry Schallert. Larry?
Thank you very much. Thank you all for attending, and thank you, Will. We're gonna miss you in your extremely important role, and you've done such a great job. So you deserve a lot of accolades and appreciation for everything you've done. So thank you very much. We hope to see you soon. So I'm Larry, and this first slide, just kind of calm everybody down, make sure we're all kind of centered, because one of the things I want to try to emphasize is that when you're working with people with intellectual disabilities and autism spectrum, you need to be in a good space yourself. So some of this is really designed to keep in mind your own kinds of well-being, as well as the well-being of the students that you're working with. And this is not necessarily just for people with intellectual disabilities, but so I'm going to spread throughout the time, what's going on with you as educators or as administrators or personal counselors or whatever your role happens to be. So now I have to make sure I can move the slides. There we go. So we're going to be talking about mental health considerations for you and for students. So how you can support students. First, just to let you know, the Student Health and Wellness Center at College of the Canyons, we're not unlike other health and wellness centers throughout the community college system. We provide health, mental health, wellness, prevention, outreach. We do a lot of outreach and training, both in the community as well as on campus with students, with staff, with community members. Do a lot of training. We help with health insurance enrollment. We help with housing insecurity. And we have these clubs like the Autism Social Alliance, Active Minds, which is a mental health awareness club, and My Gen, My Fight, which is human trafficking awareness. And we have NAMI groups on campus, peer advocacy teams, and that sort of thing. So I'm going to emphasize a little bit this Autism Social Alliance, because what we've done with Autism Social Alliance is we have students that are on the spectrum, or people that are wanting to learn about students on the spectrum, including staff and faculty, and people that don't want to necessarily identify as being ASD, come to this program. We meet every Wednesday at 3:30, rain or shine, and they really like it to be there. So we meet through the summer, we meet through the winter session. The only time we don't meet is, if the campus is closed. But we do fun and outdoor games. But mostly it's going through people's creative arts and expression. So these students, as you probably all know, can be extremely creative. They can be really great with not just their creativity, but also how they express it. They have some real skills in some of these things. So calm down, helps me to calm down, and we'll get started. So one of the things that's been happening for everyone, and so for everyone is trauma, And what in Santa Clarita, we've had a lot of trauma. We're going to be focusing a lot on the COVID situation today. But as many of you know, we had the Saugus shootings where a young high school student came on campus with a ghost gun and fired lots of shots, and he actually killed several students. Right after that, schools closed and we went into the COVID lockdown. So that's still reverberating. We still see students here that talk about their time at Saugus High School because they've been isolated since then. So there's been a real ripple effect. So we always kind of ask, what high school did you go to? And if we know they went to Saugus or even went to one of the high schools in Santa Clarita, everybody's been affected. But civil unrest sparked by what happened with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and others is also a major stressor. Things people have been affected by. The Borderline shootings, if you didn't know, is that Borderline was like a Western kind of dance place that a lot of our students go to. It's in Thousand Oaks on Thursday night. And we have many students that went there. I have a student that I'm seeing regularly that was there with her brother and her brother's friend, and she was right there, and her brother's friend passed away, was shot, saving her. So it's a lot of that kind of thing going on. The Las Vegas shootings, we had fires, we have holiday blues, but we also have the election and political distress, and we had the firehouse shootings where a fireman came and he shot 3 people, and including his mother, a mother of 3, his ex-wife. We have the assaults on Asian American and Pacific Islanders, and now we're dealing with Ukraine atrocities and the outrage and the just every day you hear on the news, what's going on with Ukraine. So trauma, we try to be trauma focused with all our mental health kinds of approaches and try to remember what sort of traumas people have gone through, will have gone through. And so when we look at suicide statistics in the Santa Clarita Valleys, another thing we're noticing is in the last 4 years, this is kind of what we've been looking at. In 2018, we had 38 suicides. We work really closely with the sheriff to get these statistics. 2019, we were doing pretty good. 2020, we thought we were really doing, because we have a coalition that really looks at this really strongly. We meet every month. We try everything we can think of. And alarmingly, 2021 suicides went up. It doubled. You can see it doubled. So this is not a small problem. Mental health issues of people coming out of the COVID situation. And now in 2022, the last I heard, which was last month, there was 8. But if it keeps going up, it could double again to 60. Now, if you think about our towns, like 200,000 people or so, going from 15 to 30, doubling again. Everyone's, we're not atypical. This is going on all across the county and the state. We really also look really closely at the College of the Canyons suicide rates. When I first come on, there was like average 3. I've been here since 2013. 3 or so a year. 1 year we got it down to 2, and that was one person. I have a question mark on there because one of it was a student that was here just from high school, an athlete. She was here for 1 class and killed herself over the holidays. She was a Spanish class she was taking, but we've kept it down to 0 and 0, 0. So I suggest to all colleges that really pay attention to this number and pay attention to what you can do, because we try to do everything that we can possibly do to address the issue of suicide and suicide prevention. And there's lots of stigma related to suicide, to mental health, as you know, and the stigma of getting services, and some cultures are a little more uncomfortable with accessing services. So we kind of try to pay attention to this stuff. And because, for us today, we know people on the spectrum often are suicidal. Many of them, if you talk to them, they were very suicidal in high school because of the history of being abused, bullied, and everything else, and not feeling like they belonged, and not feeling they were connected. So it's not unusual at all for people to feel suicidal, especially in high school, but also in college when they don't feel connected. So suicide is the second leading cause of death for this general age group, and it's the second leading cause of death for college age youth. So it's not a small problem. And so we try to make sure we teach things like mental health first aid and mindfulness and anger management and everything else anything we can think of that's slightly related to health and mental health. So, but the COVID crisis, really shows that we have some weaknesses in our society, as you've probably followed everything that went on during the COVID thing, you saw disability services were weak, nursing homes were really weak, homelessness, all these things were impacted strongly, and we just didn't really have really great answers, including mental health services and prevention, and disparities in certain populations. Some people were able to, drive, Arizona and get their COVID tests right away, or they're able to get, high-end services if they did have COVID. So the disparities are still there, but this crisis really kind of, shone a light on them. So when it comes to trauma, like I said, we're really trauma focused. And so we really look at these, the trauma that can be here. So it can be life-changing, right? But these are some of the things that can happen when you're, traumatized. And it doesn't mean just COVID, but if you're been sexually abused, or you're in a domestic violence situation, or you lost somebody, which many people did in the COVID, you can have some of these feelings. And whether you were in a fire like we were, the fire came right down to our backyard. If we weren't there with all the neighbors, we wouldn't have a house. A little traumatizing, but not as bad as somebody that lost their house. Well, a lot of people around our area did, So these are some of the things you're kind of looking for, sleep issues, irritability and anger, suicidal ideation. We have students that have been isolated in their homes because of COVID, and they're boiling over, with issues related to, their parents, or, just being lonely. But all these things can happen. But when you're starting seeing the flashbacks and the somatic complaints, dissociation, all these things. But we know, and this is the take home here, professional help can be beneficial. Talking about the experience is therapeutic if it's in a safe, non-judgmental setting with trusted friends, families, or colleagues. And sometimes that's you, with your colleagues. Sometimes that's you with your family, and sometimes that's you with your students, And so we know that talking about it, there's lots of research, actually some of it's coming out of UCLA, that says if you make eye contact with somebody that's distressed, it's actually a healing experience. So look straight, being able to look somebody straight in the eye and let them know you really kind of get it, you really understand what's going on. There's actually a chemical reaction that's actually healing. I can go into that a lot more, but not today. But now we're all returning to campus, right? Some colleges, they're all back. The College of the Canyons, we're like 1/5 back, but some, like, here's what everyone's feeling, some feel excited, they're really excited. Here we go, we're back. And some are apprehensive, they're kind of anxious, and some are like, well, I don't know if I like it or not. Some don't even know how they feel, they haven't ever, they don't have a therapist going, well, how are you feeling about this? So they're just kind of bouncing around with not even, don't know what they feel like. But again, some people are going to feel relief. They're going to like the structure, for the people on the spectrum, or people on the with ADHD, the structure might be sort of soothing to them. That might help them, but at the same time, they're having these other feelings as well. And so when I want you to take just like 20 seconds to be mindful of how you feel about coming back to campus. Just, how do I feel about coming back to campus? any of this stuff? You know, so, and that's kind of one of the things we really try to help with, is being mindful of what your feelings actually are, you know. But this is what we've noticed, you know, with students. Their social development has been interrupted. It's been delayed. It's been stunted, you know, however you want to say it, by not being in a typical social environment, such as a college campus. If you remember when you were in college, just being in college, you developed social skills, you developed socially, right? People on the spectrum have not developed socially as they may have, you know, being on a college campus, as hard as it might be for somebody that's intellectually disabled or on the spectrum. But this is true for all students. And it's true for a lot of us, right? So 2 years of social development has been kind of interrupted, you know? It's like with students, you know, spend, you know, 3 years getting high. Well, sometimes you get 3 years getting high all the time, you know, you really kind of stop developing when you're like 15, if that's when you started. And then when you stop, you kind of have to go back in some ways. So this is what's happening, what we're noticing. And that's one of the reasons we think their students are so the mental health issues of students are so profound, because they kind of held out for a little while, they kind of, as long as they could, but things are starting to break because you can only, you know, not develop socially for so long. So now we have a lot of students in crisis mode. You know, the typical development, you know, they're not really equipped to be on campus, to be in the social environment, to be alone, you know, or to be with others. And I think we're all pretty clear, at least here, that, you know, it's worse for students with ASD or intellectual disabilities. Or if you have maybe a pre-existing condition like schizophrenia or anxiety or depression or something like that, or you've had a trauma, while you were in lockdown. So there's a big range of tasks, right, for everybody to sort of deal with. And I keep wanting to emphasize it's not just people on the spectrum, but it's all of us. You know, we want to really pay attention to all of what everybody that's gone through this, because I think you're going to be better off helping your students if you're kind of aware of, it's not just you, it's not just them, it's your colleagues, it's your professors, it's your people that work for you and people you work for. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of stress in trying to learn new things, and you all know that, you know, but imagine all the learning you had to do if you were on the spectrum. But there's a lot of anger and anguish, you know, Black, African American, and Latinx and AAPI, they're going through a lot of things, right? You know, I had one student here that the anguish of having to, every day he's got to dress up, he's got to wear a sweater, he's got to have a collar, he doesn't want to go across town because he's afraid, and it's not an unfounded fear that he's going to be stopped, and maybe he's going to be pulled out of his car, maybe his hands are going to be on the hood, or he's going to be on the curb, which doesn't happen to a lot of us, you know. So he's got to dress differently, and it's just after a while, you know, there's a lot of anguish and anger about that, and it just happens. But it builds up, and with recent civil unrest, you know, we've sort of come to a lot of our awareness, but it doesn't mean that the problem is solved, right? So there's people with economic troubles, you know, layoffs, and now there's inflation. We know there's inflation all over the world, but, you know, everybody's going to blame, you know, whatever administration's in town, even though inflation's like all over the world. So like, well, it maybe feels like, hey, there's just no control over this thing. And or maybe we're using, you know, we're expressing anger when really what we're doing is feeling anxious. And everybody's had to make, you know, impossible adjustments. We've all had to make adjustments. We've gotten all pretty good at Zoom, but still, you know, having to, you know, do your classes on Zoom, and now you're going back to the school, or maybe you're doing, you know, hybrid now, and I got to learn hybrid, and I got to learn some of the new stuff. So basically what happens is anxiety and depression start creeping in. And this is true really for our students, our students that need the accommodations, but it's true for all of us. Anxiety and depression starts creeping in. So pay attention to that with yourself, and that might give you some little bit of hints on what some of the other people are going through, So our well-being is being challenged, right? We're a little more fragile. We're grieving loss, things aren't predictable like they used to be. A lot of our students didn't have a graduation. They didn't have a prom. Their holidays were interfered with for years. And, for a long time, the freedom to come and go whenever we please was really taken away from us. And that's, and for us, the relationship with our students has changed. You all know that when you're on a campus, you create relationships with students, you create relationships with colleagues and your customers and your clients and everybody else. It's not the same when with COVID. So all that stuff has been interrupted, and there's sadness, and there's like loneliness, and there's like disconnected. The time on campus really was important. Some of us really liked being off campus, and some of us, hated being off campus, and some of us said, well, I don't have to drive. Yeah, that's all that good. But if you work in mental health, let's say, but if you work in the college system, the thing that makes you really tick, that really gives you your love of is the relationships that you make with your colleagues and with your students. That's your paycheck, really. And a lot of that stuff has been missing now. So, but a lot of people lost friends and loved ones too, and there's not that touch and that hugs that used to be there, come easily, and now we're kind of worried about sickness and death and that sort of thing that we didn't have to really worry about as much, and those who already had a mental illness, those who had psychosis, had schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, all these things, post-traumatic stress, all those people that had that in the beginning, the COVID thing exacerbated, right? As did some of the traumas that happened. So they made it worse, made it more profound. And anybody that had kids knew what happened with that. While, parents had to sort of juggle parenting and teaching. A lot of people had to teach their kids from home while you're still doing a full-time job. So the single parents really had a tough time with this thing, and they're still kind of like reeling from it. But maybe really happy that their kids are back at school. So there's that. But it was hard on everybody, law enforcement teams and firefighters, all these things. Everybody had to sort of deal with this. So nobody went unscathed by the COVID. Even I talked to my guy that picks up the trash. I go, what's it like for you? And he said, I'm working 10 times more because there's so many people out because of COVID, so it stressed everyone. And our poor grocery workers during the COVID thing, they kept it up, man. Those guys, an emergency room, my son's an ER doc, and so what he went through was like incredible. So everybody had some trouble. I like this quote from Hector Martinez. He's an advocate for mental health. He's on the spectrum. He comes to our mental health commission meetings. He always has something to say. But one of the things he said I thought was really good. He says a lot of stuff that's good, but one of the things he said is, how does it feel? I have years of experience being separate from society. Like, so now you guys know what it's like, right? This is what it's like. So when you're, when you're on the spectrum, you feel these things, uncertainty, unexpected events, you kind of always feel this lack of control. You're sort of always a little isolated. You got anxiety, depression is kind of there. Always kind of disoriented, you're desperate for it to end, but it doesn't, everything, you hate routine being disrupted and all this stuff. So what his advice, is to just lean into that feeling that you had, remember you had these feelings. I mean, most of you, some of you just like sailed through this and all power to you. But some of you had these feelings, during the COVID thing. And this is the way people on the spectrum and people with intellectual disabilities feel a lot of the time. So your feelings, you can empathize, you can connect with your students if you kind of remember how it was for you. And that's kind of maybe my biggest message of the day, right? But other things are going on, right? We talked a little bit about trauma. We have students that have been sexually assaulted, right? Sexually abused. We have a lot of military people on campus, people that have been military sexual trauma. There's more men that are sexually traumatized than women in the military. That's because there's more men, but it's not an uncommon thing for men to be sexually traumatized while they're in the service, but we won't go into PTSD too much, but all these things are happening, first responder trauma, people on campus, we pride ourselves to be able to manage people on campus that have psychosis, that have bipolar disorder, have schizophrenia, major depression, but it doesn't mean it's easy for them or for us, but people have anxiety and depression. People have life events, family stress, economic distress, and people have relationships. They still have relationships, or people don't have relationships. I have a lot of students that just can't get it going with relationships due to the shutdowns and stuff. But I underline relationships because people do kill themselves because of relationships. So we try to take those things very seriously, whether they're on the spectrum or not on the spectrum, whether they're intellectually disabled or not. Relationships, people kill themselves over relationships. We got a couple of questions. Let me go through this really quick and we'll take some questions. All these other things are also on campus: eating disorders, attention deficit problems. We'll talk a lot more about autism and intellectual disabilities, but people have substance abuse. We have military people that are coming on campus. We have 400 or 500 people that have been in the military. They have been, operating multi-million-dollar weapon systems and been in charge of 25, 30, 50 people. And now they're sitting there next to an 18-year-old that doesn't really care that much about, their education. And this person's trying to get back into it. And so there's this disconnect. So we try really hard to connect with people in military or people whose military families. But we also have older students and people that have work-related stress due to being first responders and holiday blues. So all this is going on, including this, but any combination of the above is going on. So when you're dealing with people on the spectrum, you're dealing with your students, you got to take into account some of this might be going on. But if you're kind of like, well, I get that, I've heard a little bit about that, I know what I can, maybe there's something I can do with that. So you have some questions?
Yes, sir.
Let me take a look here. Sorry, I tend to just kind of get, so just go from the top.
Yeah, it'd probably be a good idea for us to read the question out so everyone benefits from the question and response.
Okay, so give me a moment here.
I can read it out if you'd like.
If you can find a question, it'd be great.
Yeah, okay, great.
I'll see if I can find it.
What do we think about young people engaging heavily with social media platforms such as Discord in order to sustain strong communities and connection with peers during the pandemic? That's the first question. Okay, so as everybody knows, and so I'm not bringing up anything new, social media can be extremely helpful and extremely hurtful. Discord is one of those ways of communicating. You can kind of stay off the grid of your parents and other people. But there's a lot of scapegoating, there's a lot of bullying. But even more important than that is people tend to sort of show off, or they tend to say how happy they are. They only post it when they're doing great. So it's kind of one student, I said, it's poison. He has to stay off Facebook. He has to stay off Instagram because it's just poison to him. It makes him depressed because his life isn't like that. And you try to tell him, well, not everybody's life isn't like that, but people only post when, something cool happened or they're doing something cool, they're having a party, they're with their girlfriend or whatever. So it's kind of a way sometimes of, saying how your life is cool and telling people
this and that. But at the same time, sometimes it's here's I'm doing good. I'm not going to tell you that I'm also suicidal, or I'm not going to tell you other stuff. So that's one thing. So you want to help students to just not take everything, to learn to decrease their social media because of that reason. But another thing that happens with social media is students begin to think that that's the way you communicate. I can't tell you how many times students have talked to me about the fight they had with their girlfriend or their boyfriend. And after a while you go, wait, that's on text? You actually, you had a fight like that on text or on Facebook? Oh yeah. And you realize that, the nuance of having a discussion with somebody that you're disagreeing with, or somebody you're not connected with, on text, you just miss so much, So they're staying connected with each other in a way, but in a way it's total disconnect. And they do it on FaceTime too. Like I just had a student a couple of days ago talk about this gigantic fight he had with his girlfriend on FaceTime. I gotta admit, yeah, I didn't have that when I was in college, so I don't know how that is, but that's kind of what it's come down to. So we're telling people, moderate with your social media, and you all moderate with your Instagram or your Facebook time, because it's kind of fun, but it's also addictive. So the third part of this is social media is addictive. There's plenty of there's plenty of research that shows the same kind of things that's happening with the dopamine and the addiction is happening. It doesn't have the same terrible effects that heroin and meth have, but over the long term, sometimes I'll ask a student, well, how much media, how much, so it'll be 6 hours a day. They're doing 6 hours a day. Wow. And then you're not doing well in your classes. So you help them, just like 6 hours a day. Well, if you take a few puffs of this marijuana they're smoking, that's 6 hours you're out, right? The same thing with video games. 6 hours you're not working on your goals. So we try to help them to sort of be mindful of, can you cut that down? Can you cut that down a little bit? Because they can get addicted to their games. They can get addicted to watching Facebook, but they can also get addicted to porn and all kinds of other negative sorts of things that happen with social media. So it's not going to go away. With media, we can do what we're doing today, and it's all great. There's so many great things, but there's so many things that, there's so many hazards. So we'll talk about this a little bit later, but one of the ways to manage stress and the anxiety and the trauma that we're all going through is cut down on social media, and it doesn't mean you have to cut it down completely, but cut it down.
So Larry, maybe you might feel that this second question is similar to that, or that you responded to this somewhat in your answer. But the second question is, how does heavy social media use promote social, intellectual, and emotional development, or how does it impede these?
Yeah, well, I think it might have answered that mostly. It's certainly, everybody's gotten to be a better typer. So there's some good things about it. You can talk to your grandma in Nebraska. You can stay in touch with your friends in ways that you never did. There's so many positives about it. It helps you to stay connected with people. And during COVID, it was a crucial way to stay connected with people, right? But at the same time, and gosh, when I went to college, I had to go to the library. It's like, and I loved going to the library, but you don't have to go to the library now. So you go to the library, so you can do your research, and you don't see your colleagues in the library. You don't chat before and after you go. There's so many things that you don't do now because, you're sort of isolated in your own kind of world. So there's so many positives about being able, I don't know anything about that. Oh, schizophrenia, well, let me look that up, or somebody says, well, I think I got OCD. Let me look at it. Well, I looked it up. I have OCD. Well, what do you mean? So there's so many positive things about media, but the negative things is you can get really isolated. You can start believing everything you want. as we all know, you can be hooked into human trafficking or being, a terrorist or a conspiracy. Look at what happened with ISIS. Those guys were able to bring those folks from all over the world into Syria with social media. So it used to be if you were pulled into a cult, you had to actually be there. They'd cut down your sleep, they'd cut down on your food, they'd eliminate your privacy, and over time you could pull somebody into a cult and you could keep them there with all the reasons they do. Now you can do that on social media, which is a huge difference. So there's so many hazards, and they're doing it now with human trafficking, starting with kids that are 11, 12 years old. So it's hazardous, and it's wonderful all at the same time. So, okay. There's a question of, see people coming in who have past traumas, who have come to the surface and needing therapy to help them. Right. I mean, you have another question there?
Yeah, where were you reading? I'm getting this, I'm pulling this now from the Q&A.
Okay.
May I? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, why don't you just do that and we'll go from there.
Sure. So can you share your general approach to counseling students who display signs of trauma? And then what advice do you have for faculty to engage in productive conversations with students about their mental health needs while maintaining the proper balance between being a classroom teacher and being a professional counselor or therapist?
Yeah.
So two questions there.
I'm hoping to get to all that.
Okay.
So can we hold that until we, hopefully we'll get to that.
Sure.
Here's a little, we have this Autism Social Alliance, and I know I was going to give this little talk. So I said, well, hey guys, there was a few people that I asked to come, like, well, what were your feelings about being, in COVID, and how do you feel about coming back? So I just got a few of the guys together to answer these questions. So this is kind of fun to listen to how they dealt with COVID and return back. And they gave me permission to play.
Okay, we're at the College of the Canyons ASA, Autism Social Alliance, and I'm asking some of our members two questions. One of them is, what was it like in COVID, and what's it like coming back to college? So Carlos has said that he'll go first. So Carlos, can you answer those questions for us?
Yeah, I feel like being on the spectrum, and generally for me, I'm a very, very introverted and a very reserved person. So when I heard that we can take all the classes online and we don't have to meet, it was really good in some aspects, and it was really terrible in some other aspects, because I was worried about how it was going to affect school. But it was also really cool because people on the spectrum, we have special interests. So I got to do a lot of escapism and just reflecting on my own about a bunch of different things. But I feel like I had a lot more downs than ups, because I feel like it's hard for me to socialize to begin with. So being in a pandemic where you couldn't really see anyone was kind of exasperated those social faults of mine that were already there. So it made them kind of even more prevalent and even worse in a way. But I feel like we also connected a lot through Zoom. The Zoom meetings really helped a lot. I feel like also through the pandemic, people on the spectrum, and not just people on the spectrum, people in general, gravitated towards a lot of things like Zoom meetings and Discord, and just following a bunch of people and just getting to know each other online. So I guess my communication skills online kind of improved in a way. And as far as going back, it was a weird transition because I hadn't been on campus in a while, but I feel like the transition was kind of natural. It wasn't jarring. And I feel like in general, there was just a lot of pros and a lot of cons to it.
Okay, what was one of the cons?
I think I'd mentioned it before, but it's like, like socially, I was struggling with things I didn't struggle with before the pandemic. Like for some reason now I notice that I'm a stumbler on words a lot. I take long pauses after I speak. And I feel like, I don't know, like those aspects of my social skill just kind of got worse during, the lockdown in general.
So coming back, you feel like you somewhat took a half step back.
Yeah, we took two steps, like the saying is, we took 2 steps forward in one way, and then we took a step back with some other things.
Great. Well, thanks, Carlos. That's very helpful. How about you, Aiden? Can you answer those questions for us?
Well, how did it affect me when it came to the pandemic?
Yes.
Well, I have to say when it came to that specifically, there was a big part of me that was like, oh, I guess I'm not going to class anymore. I was just taking online classes. I would say it definitely hurt me a bit when I was taking the first part of my one of my courses, because it was right in the middle of like my course. So it was like we had to like adapt to a different like way of thinking. I actually figured out that after that happened, I was better at like online classes. And now that I'm going back into like in-person things, I feel like I'm having a bit more trouble getting back into that. So I would say it's kind of a weird, like you're going into a different way of thinking, and now like your way of thinking is a little bit off.
That makes a lot of sense.
Because I think I did pretty well on like the online format, like the way it was structured. Because you could figure out exactly what you needed to learn, like through the resources they gave you to learn that aspect.
Makes sense. How did ASA help you with this stuff?
I believe it helped me with like talking to people, because like when you're at home, you don't really get that many interaction with people. And with this format, with how Zoom calls work, it felt like I wasn't like not interacting with people, and I wasn't like socially distant from everyone.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. How about you, Jake?
Well, for the pandemic, let me just say, I never thought I was going to experience being in the middle of a pandemic. So it was quite a change. Having to stay locked down and suddenly seeing that it affected all these people, the businesses you were a part of, and even the programs that were supposed to help you that can't help because of certain circumstances and all that. So it became a real challenge. But after a while, it's still slow now, but it's gotten better, I would have to say.
How's it coming back to college? How's it coming back?
Well, since I technically graduated college, I would feel that going back would definitely be a great experience to have again after being home for a while. I mean, and even doing online classes, it was definitely a change. But it's actually really nice to be back from college. If I was going back, I would like the fact that I'm going back.
Would you have any advice for teachers or instructors or college professors?
Well, for like just anything, or like just advice?
It's a trick question, I know. No, for people coming back, for students on the autism spectrum coming back to college.
Get used to being in your classroom again, first of all. But yeah, just remember to stay safe. Make sure your students are staying safe in class, and yeah, we'll get through this and we'll get it done.
All right. All right, Kenny, I know you're not a student here at the college anymore, but you participate on a weekly basis. Do you have anything you'd like to add to how it's been for you?
Yeah, this pandemic, it's a little bittersweet for me. I was very depressed a lot of times during the pandemic, not being able to see people face to face and having to be stuck at home all the time. Me being the extroverted person I am, very hard not being able to do the stuff I do, going to travel places. A lot of plans got rain checked, and it was very frustrating for me. And yeah, all my sports like bowling and going to the gym, going to work out. But I mean, another thing I could do to substitute that was, of course, going on hikes. And I always like to hike as well. But yeah, and also it changed a lot of people. I mean, I've burnt quite a few bridges during COVID. You know, I just couldn't take it anymore. Eventually, when things started to get a tad better, but yet there were still people on the fence about COVID. And I would tell them, can it already, guys, can it? And they took that very offensively, and you know, they made the decision to 86 me from their life and whatnot. But yeah, you know, I'm glad I can still count on ASA, and you know, for the past 4.5 years being a part of this group, I'm, you know, fortunate to know each and everyone in the ASA, and I'm glad I can always count on them to be there for me when I most need it. But as far as like people out of the ASA, you know, that's a whole different ball game right there. But yeah, there have been some silver linings to this pandemic, especially with my YouTube algorithm. You know, it's helped me improve my craft for sure. Of course, when I first came to COC all those years back, you saw the progress I went, you know, how bland my videos were, no music, just straight up talking to the camera, and yeah, no slideshows. Yeah, you know, the pandemic gave me a chance to evolve my craft, and of course, you know, getting the guests I've been able to get, and you know, hearing their testimony about working on some of my favorite movies of all time and working with some famous A-listers and what have you. And yeah, I just want to continue to evolve my craft. And, you know, now that things are slightly going back, you know, I know things are busy for people, but yeah, I just want to continue to rock, you know, the industry's world and just the world as a whole. And I'm just interested to see where things take off from here. So yeah, there's a lot of good, a lot of bad that happened in the pandemic. And now I feel if it didn't happen, I wouldn't be where I am right now.
Right. So it seems like for everyone, there's good and bad. You know, there's the silver linings, as someone said, and there's some stuff that was really difficult. And similarly, coming back, there's silver linings coming back, the stuff that makes it hard as well. So, Kenny, you're not going to college anymore, but you're producing these amazing videos. So it's now you have a whole portfolio of things and some cachet, so people answer your calls when you call them. So there's that too. So any last words anybody has that want to add? Okay, well, with that, we'll close, and we'll talk to you on the other end. Thank you for your input, guys.
So I can't tell you how fun a group this is. This was only a few.
Okay, we're at the College of the Canyon.
Let's get out of here. So yeah, Kenny's making these amazing videos. They're all doing some incredible art. You know, we've had a lot of students that have graduated, gone on to Yale and UCLA and CSUN and that sort of thing. So it's sometimes they come back. We say the alumni are still welcome, so they come back. So it gives you a little bit idea what they've been kind of going through. But as a reminder, students on the spectrum can, with support, be very successful in school. But you got to kind of sense there that having some kind of community, making friends is really important. So that's what we really try to do is try to make sure that people on the spectrum and people that are intellectually disabled don't just come to college and be isolated, and just because that's not going to help. It really helps them to have, you know, some kind of community. And the problem with the COVID thing was really hard to keep that going. But we kept it going with our weekly Zoom group. So in terms of technology, that's going to be really helpful with keeping people feeling like they're connected or something. But for some students, just attending college is an accomplishment. And for some, it can be really stressful and hazardous. And because if they get isolated, they can get suicidal, they can get really upset and stressed and just drop out, you know. But most students really appreciate the support from you guys and their peers, you know. You know, this is probably some you all know for sure. but these folks can bring a lot of positive attributes to the campus and the community. They have unique perspective that enriches all of our lives. People on the spectrum can be very persistent, given the right circumstances, and can really accomplish a lot of things. And sometimes ASD individuals are very conscientious, they're logical, they're attentive to detail, and they thrive on routine. So they're really good at certain things, and art and creative arts is one of them. Machining is another one. There's lots of ones, lots of professions and subjects that they're really, really good at, better than us, because they're a little more conscientious and attentive to detail. Try to keep in mind that people on the spectrum, don't necessarily like to be alone. And we sure felt that, they rather experience an increased level of loneliness related to the lack of the skills, and understanding and acceptance. And obviously people with intellectual disabilities are often overtly social. I have a sister that has Down syndrome. She just passed away during COVID. But she was just very, very, very social. And if you know anybody that's Down syndrome, you know kind of what I'm talking about. But people with ID and ASD and mental health, they're under stress. They feel these kinds of feelings: social rejection, stigmatization, lack of acceptance. So the family issues are really important. If they have a good family that's supportive, it's great. If they don't, it's not so great, right? They deal with prejudice, economic disadvantage. Sometimes culture and ethic issues are an issue, right? With the shame and isolation, and they're risk at law enforcement, because we try to teach law enforcement about these disabilities, but sometimes they're not aware, and they'll make assumptions that somebody on the spectrum is getting too close to somebody, or that they're not communicating right, and they'll end up in a really negative situation. So we try to train law enforcement to be able to manage people that have disabilities. So what can we do? Maybe this might start answering some of the questions. So self-care for yourself is really important, right? In our profession, mental health profession, it's unethical. It's an ethical responsibility to do self-care. And so it's really important. I think that's true of faculty and administration too. So you take care of yourself. But you can, as a team, consider mental health days as a healthy use of vacation time. It's really important to take that time off, just be at your home when the sun's still out, which is really rare for a lot of us, but you keep a pulse on your own team members, your fellow students, empathize, assess, listen, address stigma, So it's okay to have mental health issues. It's okay to be stressed. It's okay to be anxious and depressed. So you address that stigma. So you keep your team intact, right? If you're administrators, you really want to have clear, transparent, appropriate safety measures, But it's really stressful if you're an administrator and you're the one that has to implement those. Trust me, I know what that's like. But it's really stressful just for administration to have to deal with that, as well as everything else that you have to deal with, and put a lot of strain on administration in the colleges. So this kind of time, just take a breath, relax, let your body kind of clear out, and we'll go to the next thing. So what else can you do? You can acknowledge that the transitions challenges are difficult. The difficulty you get used to. It was difficult to get used to your at-home routine, and it's difficult to come back. So that's kind of what we're doing today. We're sort of acknowledging this is not easy for everyone, for anyone, and especially our students that are on the spectrum and have intellectual disabilities, but for all of us. So you just acknowledge that, and that's going to help your students, offer, flexible schedules for your team, embrace and normalize a culture of self-care. And we all have to build back our stamina, because, man, You know, you used to sort of, well, you know, I don't have to, you know, I can wear my jeans and nobody even wears, you know, there's all kinds of stuff that you have to get used to coming back. This is one of the, I like this picture because she's doing something that's something really healthy to do. You put your hands back like that and you stretch out your back and you stretch out your shoulders and, you know, you just sort of smile and make yourself happy. Just try that sometime in the privacy of your own house. You'll see that it's actually healthy. But what can you do for your neurodiverse students, you know? So this is maybe the heart of what we're talking about today. You know, you really want to make yourself available. If you take care of yourself, you're going to be more available to your students, you know. Listen to them non-judgmentally, you know. That's part of the tenets of mental health first aid. You don't have to be a therapist or anything else, but if you listen non-judgmentally to what's going on with them, you'll be in a better sense to know what to do, for one, but you'll have that kind of connection, you know. Tune into their emotions, their anxieties, their fears, their irritability, all these things that students are going through, right? We kind of gave you a little sense of what was happening out there, but all these things are happening. You give reassurance, like things can be okay. People do recover. I was talking to a student just the other day where, you know, he just feels like he can't recover from this trauma. And you just know you can recover. People do recover, you know. You give information, you sort of teach them, you know, you learn about autism, you learn about intellectual disabilities, you learn about all the different things that happen with people, including mental health issues like schizophrenia and bipolar. If you have that information, you can give that information to people. And I gotta say, having patience and a sense of humor is also really important. You have to have a sense of humor when you work with anybody, but certainly when you work with neurodiverse students, you know. But you have to take your time, and I'm going through these like one by one because they're all really important to me. Take the time to let a relationship develop. People on the spectrum don't necessarily trust you right away. But if you have a relationship with them, you know, if they do get into trouble, if they do get off track, you can call them in or you can talk to them after class. You go, hey, what's going on? If you have that relationship, it's really important. You can't just not have a relationship and expect. Well, I have so many colleagues or teachers that call me and you go, hey, the student's doing this. And I go, oh, I know he'd do that. I've got the relationship with him and I know that he's not a threat or she's not a threat, you know, but she may be doing something that needs to be, you know, tweaked a little bit. But if you have that relationship, it's really important. And giving space, you know, with people on the spectrum, for instance, you probably all know this, but you don't get too close to them. You don't necessarily touch them without permission. Some of them really like to be hugged, but most like, you know, like their space. But routines are really important, and be clear about your boundaries because people on the spectrum have sexual desires like anybody else, you know, but if just as long as you're clear with your boundaries, you're going to be okay with that, you know, but their boundaries aren't necessarily the same as our boundaries. So you just have to find out where that is, where that sweet spot is, and see the person as not the disability. He's not autistic. He's a person on the autism spectrum. You know, she's not bipolar. She's a person that has a bipolar disorder, right? So see the person, not the disability. And become an ally, you know, just like you become an ally with somebody on this LGBTQAI plus, become an ally to people on the spectrum with neurodiverse kinds of issues. And if you can connect with the family, even better. You know, a lot of times, you know, say, well, now you're 18, go to college, you're probably fine. Like, no, family usually has to hang in there a little longer with people that are neurodiverse, you know, students that are neurodiverse. They have to hang in there a little longer than they would, you know, a normal, more typical, you know, 18-year-old. And be ready, be prepared, get ready when, you know, sort of know your stuff so you're not thrown off. But for some students, being animated and being able to sort of move around is better. For others, you know, being laid back is better. You know, depends upon your style, but also just be aware that some students really like you to be more animated. Stress, this is something that's going on with people on the spectrum, all students. You know, we have this pressure to be perfect. In Santa Cruz, we're called Awesome Town. So, stressed to be perfect. But how do you know you're stressed? Sometimes you just don't know. So we try to teach these. What are the physiological signs, emotional signs, behavior kind of signs? But we really want you to try mindfulness. We try to teach mindfulness on a regular basis. And this isn't guy being mindfulness, but he's not paying attention to what's maybe stressing him, what's triggering him. And so mindfulness is a really important piece, and people on the spectrum can learn mindfulness as well. But if you do your own mindfulness, you're going to be more available. So these are just trauma signs and symptoms we can be looking for when somebody asks, like, what are we doing? I want you to first kind of look for some of these symptoms, right? Some of these symptoms are symptoms of trauma, anxiety, and anger. So somebody might be anger, but if you find out, oh, there's some trauma going on there, or somebody's being triggered, these are all happening. Difficulty concentrating, could be a lot of stuff. Thoughts of suicide. But when you get down to it, you see flashbacks and that sort of thing, nightmares. So if you can help somebody feel comfortable talking to you, then you can help them to get into the personal counseling program in your school. And then you have a good relationship with your personal counseling program. You can call them up or email them, which I get like 1 or 2 a day from an administrator or a colleague or a faculty member saying, hey, I got this going on. And I can connect with them about, okay, what do we do next? Because everybody's different, right? And these are the typical stressors that everybody's going through, especially the college grades, but also trauma. They're in relationships. They have sexual gender issues, pregnancy. They're pregnant, don't want to be, or pregnant and do want to be. All these things are going on, and I could go on and on about some of these stressors. But just kind of some of the above and all of the above. If you're aware, it's not just somebody on the spectrum, but all of our students, people on the spectrum and have the neurodiverse, all these things could be going on. So it's not just, oh, she has autism or she's on the autism spectrum, so that's the issue. No, all this stuff as well, right? So again, chill. And really quick, people on the autism spectrum and people that are it's like it's not uncommon for them to be LGBTQIA plus, right? It's not uncommon at all. So, just keep in mind that could be going on, some gender stress, that sort of thing, fitting in on a couple of different levels. But people that are transgender, 50% of transgender students have attempted suicide. So it's not a small thing to help them to feel connected. But when you do safe zones and you make them feel connected, male suicide for everybody drops by 50%, and all students drop by 9%. So if you make it campus climate safe for people, the LGBTQAI plus, you make it safe for everyone. Just real quick, some cultural issues, keep in mind. Some underserved cultural communities, mental health is not really, accepted. So people suffer in silence for a long time. There's immigration and trauma issues, generational issues. There's systematic barriers that help to keep people from getting care. Religion is really a very strong protective factor, but it can also contribute to mental illness because of the way mental illness is viewed. So we do a lot of clergy training to sort of help with this. But, if there's embarrassment and shame in the family, people on the spectrum or people that are neurodiverse maybe don't get the kind of support from home. And these are some of the protective factors that we like you to have yourself, but have to teach your students, and, some of these I can go on, but, having good problem solving skills and conflict resolution, good frustration tolerance, a lot of students don't really have that. So we can teach that sort of thing. But chronic stress really erodes our resilience, and we've had 2.5 years of chronic stress and isolation. So our resilience is all low, not just for our students, but for us, Spiritual beliefs can really help, cultural connections that affirm life, support, physical activities, social support, sense of optimism, when you focus more on the positives and negatives, it's a resilience skill. So here are some of the things you can do with anxiety and stress: mindfulness, meditation, breathing, centering. That's kind of old school centering, but it's still really important to be able to center yourself. Picture like a beam of warm light going right through the middle of your gravity. So I can, I really still like centering, even though it's kind of old school. And visualization, visualizing someplace that's the most beautiful place in the world that you've ever been. It can calm you down. So if you just take a minute, what stresses you out? I know we're going to run out of time soon, but what stresses you out? And just take a moment to think about what would a typical stressor be, and maybe take one in 15 seconds right now, or what are you worried about right now? What are you worried about right now? So some of what we do is we help students to really pay attention to what's bothering them, because you're so stressed out, you're so, you don't really pay attention to what's bothering you. And, when you do that for a long period of time, you pay attention, you can sort of let it go at periods of time. So if you sort of do visualization, that kind of thing, So these are the other tried and true coping techniques. Somebody asked, what are some of the things you can do? And you can teach this to your students, but you can also do these yourself. And I try to keep emphasizing students aren't like separate from you. We're all in the same kind of boat. So stretching, yoga, journaling is really key. Being able to write a short story, write a song. You don't have to perform it in front of a live audience, but do something and perform it, or let somebody else read it. Write a short story. It's not that hard to do. The Dutch have this thing called walking in the wind. We don't like to walk in the wind, but the Dutch do it for mental health, right? I can't pronounce this. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's things you can do. You keep a good schedule, you eat healthy. These are all, natural. But all of our students on the spectrum in our ASA, they all do some sort of creative thing, and we let them bring that every single time we meet. They bring something they've done on a creative basis every week, and they're just excited about it. And nobody ever wanted to see their drawings before, or the stuff they baked, or the music. Sorry, the choir they were in, or whatever. But creativity is a really important part of mental health, and I really urge people to access their own artists. But if you want to get connected with people on the spectrum, find out what they're good at with creativity and nurture that. We talked about this, reducing media, social media, Instagram, politics. I mean, I'm kind of a news hound. I like my news channels, but people can get, for a while, impeachment news. I couldn't keep my mind off it, but people get into porn and they never can let go. So it becomes kind of a habit, but connecting with family and friends and extended family. And sometimes you have to do that with media. This is, we had a little camp here. This kid is doing something that's really good for mental health. He's stretching out his arms and saying, hey, but these kids are hanging out together. They're doing stuff together. They're hanging on each other, and that's good for mental health. This is our Canyon baseball team. This guy right here, he's doing something that anybody that's ever played baseball knows really feels good. You put the bat behind you and you do this and you stretch back and forth. If you've ever played baseball, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you never played baseball, then you don't know, but go ahead and try it. This is my team. I was at USC, but what he's doing is stretching, right? Yay, right? Makes you feel really good. You put out this thing, hey, fight on, everybody wins, your team's winning. So you go to games or do this sort of thing. And this is this guy just won, UCLA, just won, a great game against Texas. They run to the dock. He's running and he's got his hands up. So so UCLA, USC, they're my team. So, but other coping strategies, join a Zoom group like ASA or whatever. Hike, walk the neighborhood, take a drive. Psychology, riding a bike. If you've never been on the bike trail in Santa Monica, strongly recommend you do it. It's an e-ticket. It's really a great bike ride, very easy. But these things, meditation, reframe stress as excitement. instead of stress. Doing some volunteering work, 10 city council meetings, read a book, listen to an audio book. These are all just coping strategies, right? Go swimming, walk, use a jacuzzi. And if you have students that you're close to, you can help them to remember to do these sorts of things. Random act of kindness, of course, avoiding alcohol and drugs, gaming, porn, these things are addictive. But just looking up at the sky, at the stars, listening to music, taking breaks, and contemplating what you're grateful for. And if you accomplish something meaningful. So if you help your students to accomplish something meaningful, that helps your mental health. What I'm calling intentional affiliation is after COVID, people are so isolated, they don't know what to do. So I'm telling them, you have to be intentional in your affiliation. You have to actually go out, join a club, go to Sierra Club, join the photo club, do something. You have to get, because when you're on campus, you're living two years on campus, you naturally make friends, you naturally join a club, you naturally go to your philosophy class, and after your philosophy class, you drink coffee with your friends and talk about, meaning of life or whatever it is. People aren't, they're isolated. They're coming out of this. So I'm telling people they have to get intentional about it. But as a campus, we have to intentionally engage people. So we have to do something intentionally. We can't just let it happen again. Well, they'll all get back in, and no, we have to go out. So College of the Canyons, this May 14th, we're having this giant social thing. We don't know what it's going to do, but we're doing different things to help students get engaged. So we like to keep in mind that people do recover from these mental health problems. The stigma is a barrier, and always keep in mind cultural, social, economic issues. Here's some, did we skip? Yeah, okay, here's some apps you can go to. They're all free. They're all been vetted by my young therapists. I go, tell me what you think. So these are all free apps that all help. They're all, they've been vetted by my crack young therapists. They all say these are all good. And Headspace you can get for free if you live in LA County, kind of thing. Other things you can do is you can volunteer. Volunteering helps meet people, helps you feel good about what you're doing. Looks good on your resume. So we get students to get out in there and volunteer, and then just helping your neighbors. And I put this really strongly here, check on the strong, because people that look really great, they're looking really good, not necessarily doing good. And you can be surprised that sometimes those are the people that take their own life. Wow, they were doing great. So always check on the strong, not, your students, your colleagues, even your bosses are people that work for you, right? Is a volunteer. This is these Chinese lanterns are symbolic of the 1,100 college students that take their life every year. So we give pizza out to students that put the suicide lifeline in their cell phone. This is one of our volunteers. So somebody asked, what can you do? This is it, the action plan. You assess for risk. You go, you ask, hey, are you feeling, how are you feeling? What's going on? You assess if somebody's looking like they might be, I didn't do a lot of warning signs here, but are you thinking about suicide? You don't put that in their head. They're already thinking about it. It's a relief if you notice something's going on. So you're assessing the harm, risk or harm. You listen non-judgmentally. People in the education system, this is probably what you guys do better than anybody else. This is your bread and butter. This is what you do. This is what you're good at. This is what you love to do. You listen non-judgmentally. Just find out what's going on. Don't say, well, no, she's no good anyway. I don't know why you think of that. It's like, just listen non-judgmentally so that somebody really does feel understood. Then you give reassurance. People can get better. People can recover. Things can be okay. And then, like I said before, you give information. If you know about autism, if you know about neurodiversity, if you know about, mental health issues, the more you know, the better you can give information. And then you encourage professional help. Teachers are not therapists. You have to be able to keep that role. You can do this action plan as a teacher. You don't have to be a therapist to do this. Nobody has to be a therapist to do mental health first aid, but you can encourage professional help, encourage people to go walk somebody down to the personal counseling program if that's what it takes. Call the personal counseling program, give them the number, whatever it is. But you're encouraging professional help because it's kind of out of your, people that have been traumatized really respond to professional help. There's tons and tons of research. And then encourage self-help. Remember all the things I just mentioned, all those things are good for self-help and other support strategies. So, with neurodiverse students, you really have to work with the regional center, with the education system, with community mental health, with nonprofit supports like Family Focus, with law enforcement and hospital. So it's really a community kind of effort working with people that are neurodiverse. And I can go on and on about that because I'm really big on community organization. So there's one YouTube here. I saved this to mostly for last. And our team over there and is going to, this is Kenny's latest video that he's gotten really good at getting these top names to talk to him on video. It's really quite amazing. These guys are really incredible. So why don't we just see if we can play this? And this is Kenny. He's got a YouTube channel. Let's see if we can make this work.
Hello, everyone. Today on my channel, we got a very special guest. You may best know him for his tenure in the UFC. Please give a warm welcome for the Pitbull himself, Tiago Alves.
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me, bud.
I'm glad you could be here. It was such an honor and privilege being able to train with you all those months ago back in Tracy, California. Anyways, I'd like to hear some cool stuff about your time in the UFC.
So many memories, man. UFC definitely helped shape my career. I remember the biggest victories that I had leading up to UFC 100 versus George St. Pierre. That was a crazy ride also. Overall, all my experience that I had, they're all positive. Of course, I didn't get everything that I wanted, but I got everything that I needed. So I can only be thankful for that.
Every time I heard that you were going to fight, I could not wait to see you fight. You always brought it, win, lose, or draw. That's what I appreciate about you.
I appreciate that, man. And I always come to fight. That's the way I was trained to compete. You don't train to win a fight for 50 minutes. You train to finish a fight. If the fight lasts 15, 25 minutes, props to your opponent. He was able to handle you. But I always train to finish fights. So that's why I'm always looking for that finish no matter how.
Oh, absolutely. Another reason why I was so looking forward to speaking with you is because when I posted the picture that we took together back in Tracy, and when your wife commented on my post about your son being on the autism spectrum, that really made me excited for sure.
Yeah, my son, he's 5 years old now. He's going to go to kindergarten next year. He's perfect just the way he is. And he's been progressing a lot. We changed a lot on his diet and got him all the therapy that he needs. He's seen huge improvement with his speech and he's doing phenomenal. We want to make sure that he can do anything that he put his mind into it with hard work and dedication. Anything, it's possible.
I do believe that everything does indeed happen for a reason and that you and we were destined to meet. Especially when I found out about your son being diagnosed. That just really made me skyrocket right there.
I'm glad to hear, man. It's always good to know more about the spectrum. You're very successful on the spectrum, so that gives me a lot of hope.
Thanks a lot, man. Anyway, how much of a knowledge did you have on autism prior to your son's diagnosis?
Not much at all. That's the main thing. You have no option but to learn. It's usually your son or somebody from your close family that is diagnosed on the spectrum, and then you have to learn a little bit more. I know I had a cousin growing up that now that I know more about autism, he was on the spectrum for sure, but he never got diagnosed. But he was always different in a special way. He would do things on his own way. Today he's very successful. Probably never got diagnosed. I know that now, but has a phenomenal job, a phenomenal family, phenomenal career. It's amazing to learn about how different people, excel on the spectrum.
Yeah, martial arts in general has just really helped me overcome a lot of adversity in my life, and I honestly wouldn't be who I am without martial arts. And you especially, you're a huge inspiration in my life. I've always looked up to you for as long as I can remember.
I appreciate that, man. It's always nice to hear that the work that we're doing, with passion. Of course, if I'm able to help someone, that's an extra gift. But I'm just trying to live my life as honest as possible and try to send a good message out there. And then when you get to help someone else along the way, that's just an extra bonus.
Exactly. And I feel my premise in life is to help people understand autism and help shatter stereotypes.
Absolutely, man. You're a great example for that.
It really means a lot. Anyway, in the time that we got remaining, is there anything else you'd like to say?
Thank you for this opportunity to talk to you a little bit more. April, it's Autism Month. I hope we're all having a phenomenal month.
There you guys have it. This has been my one-on-one with the pitbull himself, Tiago Alves. Thanks again for stopping by, and let's continue to help make the world a better place.
So, yes. I just get a kick out of Kenny's videos because he makes one a week, and he brings them in, and he's able to he's able to talk to these people, and they talk to him, and he gets these stars, and he always talks about autism and his autism and their connection with autism. Sometimes he teaches them about autism. He's gotten really good over the, before it was kind of chunky when he first started, but he's gotten, really quite good at it. Sometimes he puts music and all that kind of stuff in there. So I thought you get a kick out of that because it shows it's what students can do. And every one of our students, as we've nurtured their creative arts, have all gotten really, really good at whatever they're doing. I wish I'd like to somehow do a presentation on all the art that's been coming out of these kind of things. So the other resources, really quick, these are just some resources that you can grab if you get a chance. Be the Difference SCV.org is these are just websites that are good for all things, and resources important. So as part of your job working with people on the spectrum is really being aware of what the resources in the community are, what the resources on campus are, and really connected with your academic accommodations or your DSPS. But if you're a DSPS, you really want to connect with your teachers and your personal counseling. So everybody kind of works together. So that's me. If you need to call me, ask me any questions. Will is back. So I know I took all the time, but any other questions or anybody, anything you want to say? I want to again thank Will and UCLA and the Tarjan Center for all you guys have done through the years. It's really impressive, and hope we can continue to keep it all together.
Thank you, Larry. We have another question. That's why you're seeing me on video. The question is, how do we find Kenny's videos, and can we use them on our campuses as outreach tools?
You can definitely use them. He would be thrilled. When I told him I was going to show this to you guys, he was ecstatic. So yeah, it's I think if you just type in Kenny Valdivia, VALDIVIA, YouTube channel, you could probably get there. He's got a whole bunch of them. Every one of them is amazing, especially in the last year. He's just gotten so improved.
Great, thank you. If there are additional questions, we have about another 2 minutes or so. Please feel free to it seems like Nathaniel Rice, thank you, Nathaniel, has put a link into the chat.
Oh, great, you found it.
Yeah, again, if there are any additional questions, please let us know. We have a couple of minutes and we'll address your questions. Thank you, Nathaniel. Larry, while we are waiting, thank you again for sharing from the wealth of your knowledge with the California community colleges and our partners. I am inserting into the chat again a link to the, here we go, a link to the evaluation. It's brief, but we'd like to get your feedback on today's webinar. Your feedback help informs what the Tarjan Center does in terms of these professional development opportunities, there are questions that enable you to insert what kinds of topics or content areas you're interested in. So if you would please take a couple of minutes to provide some feedback, that would be great. Again, Larry, thank you for sharing all of this good information with the colleges. We're still looking for questions if you have any.
Great.
So Marcy, the answer was yes, yes, yes. You may use the videos. Please, yeah, use them as it would benefit your students. Great. Any additional questions?
Thank you, Will. I really
Of course.
appreciate it. Looking forward to working closely with you in the near future.
Yay. I'm looking forward to it, Larry.
Be great.
Yeah. So I get the honor and privilege of moving over to the College of the Canyons to serve as the Director of Academic Accommodations. So I will get to work with Larry. I'm looking forward to it.
We are so thrilled that you are going to be here. And I can't wait to introduce you to all my friends in the community that are going to be really excited that you're here.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to those who attended today and participated in today's webinar. Again, we're looking for questions. If you have any, thank you for your comments. Thank you. Again, Larry, thank you again for presenting today and for availing yourself. I think this was your third time.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes. Thank you so much.
We'll have to do some more sometime.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, we done?
I think we are. So,
All right.
So yes, Ernie, you may end the session. Thank you to everyone.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Be well.
Enjoy the spring. It's beautiful out there. Take a walk in the wind.